The siren wailed. Boots slammed up the stairs. He drove his shoulder into the cell door. Metal groaned. The bolt cracked. A shotgun roared from the hall. Buckshot ripped through the frame. He ducked. Sparks burst off the hinges. The Apache prisoner flinched in chains. Keys scraped the floor. He grabbed them. A bullet punched through his coat. He twisted the lock. Blood streaked his hand. The door swung wide. The prisoner didn't move. Footsteps pounded closer. A deputy burst in. Rifle raised. He turned too slow. The muzzle flashed. Something hit the floor. Hard. Then the second shot came. But not from the law. Gunfire cracked from above. The man yanked the Apache woman's arm. She staggered, half limping, half dragged, her breath short and sharp. A bullet sparked off the stone wall beside her head. She flinched. He pulled harder. The scout covered their rear, rifle up, teeth gritted. His coat flapped open as he moved, fast, precise. Another shot. Closer this time. The scout spun and returned fire. Someone screamed. They ducked into a narrow alley. Trash barrels, broken crates, flies. Blood dripped from the woman's thigh, soaking through the cloth tied around it. The man's hands stayed under her arms, lifting, pushing, moving. They reached the back of the butcher's shop. Smoke drifted from the roof. 2 horses stood tied beside a rail, skittish and stomping. The scout turned. A bullet hit him in the shoulder. His whole body jerked. He dropped to one knee. He cursed through his teeth. The rifle clattered from his grip. He pressed one hand to the wound. Blood seeped through his fingers. Still, he stayed upright. The man let the Apache woman slide to the ground. Her eyes were glassy. Her chest rose and fell fast. He looked at the horse, then back at her. No time. He threw the saddle blanket over the mare and hoisted her with both arms. She didn't cry out, didn't flinch, just stared past him, hollow and cold. He lifted her onto the horse's back. From the alley mouth, a deputy appeared, young, maybe 17. Her revolver was up, both hands shaking. She locked eyes with the Apache woman, froze. The man stepped between them. His hand hovered near his own weapon. Breath caught in his throat. The deputy blinked, lowered the gun, just a little. The scout groaned. He climbed onto the second horse with effort, blood trailing down his side. He took the reins in one hand, raised his chin. Now. The man swung up behind the Apache woman, grabbed the reins, kicked hard. The horses bolted forward. The deputy stood frozen. Her gun hung at her side. She didn't shout, didn't follow. Bullets cracked again as they hit the edge of the street. More voices now, screams, boots on cobblestone. The man yanked the reins, turned sharply into another alley. The horses' hooves scraped and skidded. They barely made the corner. They vanished into the twisting backways of the town, the siren still screaming behind them, the jail in flames, the law chasing, smoke. But the worst was not behind them, not yet, not close. And the Apache woman had stopped breathing, or nearly. The horses slowed near the ridge. The sun hung low behind them. Dust clung to every breath. The Apache woman slumped in the saddle. Her hands dangled. Her head rolled forward. The man pulled his horse to a stop first, dismounted fast, reached up, caught her before she fell. The scout lagged behind, one hand still pressed to his shoulder. He winced as he dropped down from the saddle. Blood streaked his shirt. His rifle hung loose. The man laid her on the ground. Her lips were dry. Her skin burned. He grabbed the whiskey bottle from the saddlebag, tore open the cloth around her leg. The wound was bad, dark, wet, smelling of rot. He poured the whiskey straight onto it. She screamed. Her back arched. Her hands clawed at the ground. The sound echoed sharp against the rocks. The scout turned his face away. The man kept pouring, then wrapped the cloth tight again, fast, rough. No time for clean work. The Apache woman moaned once, then went still. The scout dropped beside a boulder, spit in the dust. That will bring war. The man looked up, breathing hard. His face was streaked with sweat and soot. It already did. She a killer. Then, she is a daughter. The scout frowned. Daughter of who? The man reached into her coat, pulled out a red cloth, folded twice, stiff with something dry. He opened it, held it in the fading light. Symbols stitched by hand, tribal markings, dark stains across the edge, one corner torn. The scout stared at it a long moment. No words came. The man folded it again. She kept it close. Closest thing she had to proof. Proof of what? That they lied, that they hanged her father for something he did not do. The scout looked out toward the plains. Smoke still rose behind them. The man stood, walked to a flat spot near the rocks, cleared the earth with his boot. He placed the red cloth beneath a ring of stones, covered it with dirt, pressed the last rock in with both hands. The Apache woman stirred faintly. Her fingers twitched, her lips moved but made no sound. The wind brushed the edge of the ridge. The horses shifted their weight. One snorted. The sun touched the horizon. The scout sat quiet, watching the last of the red sky bleed out behind them. The man stayed kneeling beside the stone. No one spoke. The ridge held its silence, and kept it. Black wood still smoked inside the jailhouse. Ash coated the floor in a thin gray skin. The roof had caved in on the east side. Beams lay broken like ribs. The sheriff stepped through the doorway with a lantern in his hand. The flame swayed with each step. Light crawled up the ruined walls. He moved slow, careful. Boot prints were burned into the dust. Blood streaks ran dark where footprints had passed. The smell of powder and scorched wood filled the air. He turned the corner. The deputy lay near the holding cells, face pale, eyes open, one arm twisted under the body. Blood pooled beneath the chest and soaked into the ash. The sheriff crouched, closed the young man's eyes with 2 fingers. His jaw tightened until the muscles jumped along his cheek. He stood. The lantern swung as he walked deeper into the cell block. Shadows swayed along the bars. Bent steel hung loose from shattered stone. At the far wall he stopped. A name was scrawled there in blood. Large, sloppy, still wet at the edges. The sheriff stared at it a long moment. His breathing stayed even. His grip tightened on the lantern handle. He turned back toward the open yard. Men were already gathering outside. Storekeepers, ranch hands, drifters pulled from porches and sidewalks. Rifles rested in hands not yet steady. The sheriff stepped into the light. Every able man rides. Now. No one argued. They scattered for horses. Saddles hit rails. Ropes snapped tight on cinches. Ammo belts slid into place. Fear moved faster than order. A clerk ran with paper in his hands. Ink spilled from the bottle as he wrote. Fingers shook. The words came fast. The name filled the page. The sheriff took the sheet, read it once, folded it, then unfolded it again and pressed it flat against a wooden post. A hammer struck. Once. Twice. The paper held. The face was drawn from memory. Hard lines, dark eyes, hair braided down the back, a scar across the left cheek, wanted dead or alive. The ink was not yet dry. Horses stamped in the street. Dust lifted under pounding hooves. Voices overlapped in sharp bursts. The sheriff mounted last. He turned his horse toward the road that led out of town, looked once more at the ruined jail behind him. His face showed nothing. He raised one hand. Ride! The posse moved as one. Behind them, the jail stood black and hollow. The lantern still burned inside. The name on the wall glistened in red. And the hunt began. The arroyo cut through the desert like a scar. Sand held the night's warmth. Stones glowed with it. Shadows clung close to the canyon walls. A small fire crackled beneath a dry ledge. Smoke lifted in thin lines. The Apache woman lay wrapped in a blanket. Her body shook. Her breath came fast and shallow. Her face burned with fever. The man sat beside her. One hand pressed against her shoulder. The other gripped the bottle. The fire reflected off the glass. The heat off her skin made his palm sweat. The scout worked in silence. His shirt was off. A strip of it tied around his own wounded arm. His hands moved with purpose. The knife he held had been blackened in the flames. Now it glowed red at the tip. The woman moaned. Her head rolled side to side, her teeth clenched. The scout crouched over her leg, unwrapped the soaked bandage. Blood stuck to the cloth. Pus clung to the edges of the gash. He lifted the hot blade. Wait! The man leaned closer. The Apache woman's hand had found his wrist, weak, but tight. Her lips moved. The words came low and slurred. He bent to hear. Could not understand. Her language folded in strange rhythm. Still he did not pull away. Her fingers trembled, but stayed locked around his arm. She turned her head toward him. Her eyes flickered open. A single tear slipped down the side of her face. Then she nodded. The scout pressed the blade to her wound. She bit down on a strip of leather. The sound was small at first, then sharp. Flesh sizzled. Smoke curled up in a sudden burst. Her whole body bucked. The man held her shoulders down. Her scream never left her throat. It broke inside her chest. The scout worked fast. 3 burns, clean. The edges of the wound seared closed. The smell hung thick in the air. He tossed the blade aside, let it cool in the sand. The Apache woman went limp. The man leaned close again, wiped sweat from her face with the edge of his shirt. Her breathing slowed. Not better, but less wild. Her hand still gripped his wrist. Only now did he see what lay in her other palm. A carved pendant, wood worn smooth by years of touch, spiral etched deep. The cord frayed to threads. She held it close to her chest. The scout stood and stepped back into the dark. His eyes scanned the ridge above. No movement, no sound. The fire hissed as a log split. The man sat there beside her, still holding her hand, still feeling the heat through her skin. Somewhere nearby, a coyote cried once, then silence, and the fire burned on. Dust rose with every footstep. The crowd pressed shoulder to shoulder, faces bent upward, eyes fixed on the gallows. The man stood near the back, hat low, hands at his sides, still. The noose swung empty, ropes creaked above. A fly buzzed near his ear, but he did not move. 2 soldiers dragged the old man up the steps, wrists bound, cheeks hollow, blood crusted at the corner of his mouth. He did not fight. A wooden plank shifted under their boots. The rope was pulled tight, the loop set rough around his throat. The Apache woman shouted from the crowd. Her voice cracked. She pushed forward, arms out. Her braid fell loose as she screamed his name. Hands grabbed her, pulled her back. She kicked, fought. Nails clawed into skin. The old man looked down, met her eyes. He nodded once. Then the hood came down. The judge never looked up. He sat at the table beside the gallows. Fat fingers pressed a pen to the parchment. Ink bled into paper. The sheriff stood behind him, arms crossed, face hard. The deputies flanked the gallows with rifles raised. The woman broke free for a breath, took 2 steps forward. 3 men tackled her. The man watched it all. From the back, still as stone, his jaw set. The hangman pulled the lever. Wood slammed. Rope snapped tight. The Apache woman screamed again, then fell silent. Only the creak of rope remained. The judge handed the paper off without lifting his eyes. Another clerk stamped it, rolled it, slid it into a leather tube. The soldiers released the tension on the rope. The body swung once, then slowed. The woman had stopped fighting. She lay in the dust, face to the side, hands curled under her chest. A deputy yanked her to her feet, dragged her away. Blood smeared across her chin. Her legs scraped across the ground. Her face was streaked with dirt and tears. No one in the crowd spoke. No one looked away. The man turned. He stepped back through the crowd, eyes down, boots silent on the dirt. No one stopped him. He walked past a mother holding a boy too young to understand, past a vendor with stale bread in his hands, past the edge of town where the gallows shadow no longer reached. He kept walking until the sound of rope on beam could no longer be heard. That was the moment when silence turned to purpose, and a man made a choice he had not yet spoken aloud. Cracked across the desert like flint on steel, Pale light bled into the rocks. The heat had not yet risen, but dust already moved under hooves. The sheriff's posse fanned out along the ridge, men dismounted, eyes down, boots scraping through dry grass and broken stone. Blood marked the trail in spots, small drops at first, then a smear on a rock, then more, leading downward through a narrow cut in the land. A deputy held up something in his hand, the scout's rifle, broken at the stock, splintered clean through. The sheriff took it, turned it over once. His eyes traced the crack, then he dropped it in the dirt. Boot tracks were easy to follow, 2 sets, then dragged lines where something heavy had moved, a body or a wounded limb. The sheriff looked back. A boy rode near the rear of the group, too young, too quiet. He held the reins with white knuckles. The rifle across his saddle was too big for him. His hat sat low over his eyes, but not low enough to hide the shape of grief carved in his face. The sheriff called a halt, pointed north. They moved. Far ahead, on the edge of the canyon, the scout stopped his horse, looked back. The sun flashed across his eyes. He tilted his head, listened. Faint, faint, then louder. The sound of riders. He turned his horse toward the canyon, clicked his tongue. The animal surged forward. Behind him, the man crouched beside the Apache woman. She leaned against a rock. Her face was drawn, pale. Her leg stiff under the weight of the wound. She could not ride far. Not fast. The man looked down the slope, saw the narrow line of the riverbed below, dry, winding through scrub and stone. He turned back to the scout. Go. The scout nodded. Once, kicked his horse into motion. Dust burst under the hooves. He vanished around a rise. The man helped the woman to her feet. She winced, bit down on her breath, said nothing. He half carried her to the horse, lifted her slow. Careful. She clutched his shoulder. Then the saddle horn. He mounted behind her. They turned toward the riverbed, moved at a crawl. Behind them, the scout's trail split clean into the rocks, kicked high and wild, meant to be followed. The sheriff's posse reached the fork within, the hour. Dust still floated in the air. The sheriff raised a hand, listened. Gunfire echoed from the canyon mouth. 1 shot, then 2. He pointed. They turned that way, fast. The boy lingered, looked down the riverbed, then followed. Far ahead, beneath the broken ribs of cottonwood trees, the man and the Apache woman disappeared into silence. The tracks grew fainter, the heat pressed closer, and the land swallowed the last of their trail. The horse slowed near a bend in the dry riverbed. The man pulled the reins. Sand shifted under hooves. Stones rolled away beneath their weight. The Apache woman raised her hand, weak, barely above her shoulder. He stopped. She slid down before he could help her. Her knees hit the ground hard. She stayed there, breathing shallow, eyes locked on something half buried in the dust. A small cross. No name, no mark, but time. Weathered, cracked through the center. The man dismounted, walked to her side. His boots pressed into the sand without sound. She pulled the pendant from beneath her shirt. The cord was nearly torn through. Her fingers moved slow as she placed it at the base of the cross. The wood clicked against stone. She did not cry. She pressed one palm to the cross, closed her eyes. The wind moved across the riverbed, dry and light. It passed through without staying. The man watched her. His voice came low, careful. What did you say back there? Her eyes opened. She looked at him, long, steady. Then she turned her head toward the canyon wall, toward the ridgeline. She spoke one word. Close. The man's spine stiffened. His hand dropped near the grip of his revolver. He scanned the trail. Saw no dust, no sound carried over the stones. Still, he believed her. She stood, wavered slightly. Her fingers touched the pendant once more before stepping back. The man knelt, brushed some of the loose sand from the base of the grave, found another shape there, a small piece of bone, animal or human. He did not ask. He looked up at her. She pointed at the grave, her hand flat. Firm, mother. The man stood. His throat tightened. They said nothing more. He led the horse forward. She followed without aid this time. Her limp sharp, breath thin. They moved down the riverbed, between broken trees and brittle weeds. The sun leaned higher. Shadows shortened. Behind them, the grave stayed quiet. The pendant caught one last flicker of light before falling into shade. Somewhere past the bend, a crow lifted from a branch. Its wings beat once, then again, then gone. The man kept one hand near his belt. His eyes stayed forward, but his ears waited for sound, the kind that came with hooves, with rifles, with men who followed dust and heat and blood. He had heard that sound before, and she had heard it now. First, they moved faster, but the silence behind them had changed. It was no longer empty. It was holding its breath. The scout rode alone. Dust poured from the trail behind him. His hand pressed to the bandage at his shoulder. Blood had dried to his shirt. He rounded a bluff and pulled the horse to a slow halt. He listened. No birds, no wind, just hoofbeats. Too many. He turned, too late. Rifles raised from the rocks. Men poured down the slope like ants from a broken mound. The sheriff stepped into view, revolver in hand, his eyes unreadable, his coat open. No word spoken. The scout raised both hands, let the reins fall. He slid down from the saddle, grimaced, fell to one knee. They surrounded him. Dust churned, boots thudded, spurs rattled. The sheriff moved close. The scout looked up. I know where they are. Silence held for a beat. The sheriff waited. The scout nodded toward the ridge behind him, toward the narrow split that led into the hidden canyon. They are there. Wounded. Slow. She will not last long without help. The sheriff's jaw shifted. He looked to one of his men, then back to the scout. You want to save her? Yes. You are a traitor to your kind. She is a child. The sheriff said nothing, lifted his revolver. The scout tensed. The shot rang out. It struck low. The scout's leg buckled. He dropped with a cry. Sand sprayed from where he hit. The sheriff holstered his gun. Leave him, a few men stared. One laughed. Another spit. The boy at the rear of the group froze. He had not dismounted. He sat his horse awkwardly, young shoulders stiff, eyes wide. He stared at the scout, at the blood pouring from the thigh, at the hand pressed hard against the wound, at the way the scout tried to breathe without making sound. The sheriff turned his horse, shouted the command. The posse moved. Dust lifted again. Heat rose behind their hooves. The boy did not move. The scout locked eyes with him. The boy looked to the others, then back. He kicked his horse, moved forward, but slow. He passed within 10 feet of the scout. He looked away, but not before the doubt had settled. Not before the shape of justice had changed inside him. Not before he understood something deep and sharp and final. The law did not hesitate to shoot a man on the ground, and sometimes the man on the ground was the only one telling the truth. The canyon swallowed the sound of hooves. The scout lay still, eyes open, face pale. His blood mixed with dust and drifted into the cracks of the earth. The gulch narrowed to a dead end. Stone walls rose high on both sides. Dry scrub crackled underfoot. Loose shale slid with every step. The man led the horse forward. The Apache woman leaned against him, her weight heavy, her wound barely wrapped, her eyes locked on the stone ahead. Nowhere left to go. He stopped at the base of the wall, looked up, then back the way they came. Too late. The sheriff rode in first. The sound of hooves echoed against the rock. His men fanned out behind him. 6 all armed, dust on their coats, sweat dark under their arms, rifles ready. The man did not move. He stepped in front of the Apache woman, hand low, legs set wide. The horse stood still behind them. The sheriff dismounted, walked forward. Each footstep, slow, deliberate. His coat swayed. His boots sent dust up in soft clouds. He stopped 10 paces from the man. No one spoke. The lawmen kept their rifles raised, fingers curled around triggers. The sun caught metal and turned it white. The Apache woman stepped forward. The man tried to stop her. She brushed past him, stood tall despite the limp, her face pale but calm. She raised both hands. No weapon, no threat, just presence. The men behind the sheriff shifted. One lowered his rifle. Another licked his lips. Then the boy rode in. He came at a gallop. His horse kicked up dust. He pulled hard at the reins. The animal skidded to a stop. The boy slid from the saddle. Eyes locked on the Apache woman, then on the sheriff. He held his rifle low. No one moved. The boy stepped forward. The rifle came up. Not toward the woman, toward the sheriff. A murmur moved through the men. The boy's face was tight, pale. His hands shook, but the barrel stayed pointed straight. The sheriff turned. His eyes locked on the boy, then dropped to the rifle. His hand hovered near his holster. Stillness held. The Apache woman watched the boy, her breath short, but steady. The man stepped behind her. Ready. The sun pressed heat into every back. A bead of sweat slipped down the sheriff's cheek. He looked at the boy, at the rifle, at the eyes that no longer feared him. His fingers twitched. The boy did not blink. The rifle did not drop. And the silence pressed in so thick it drowned the wind. The crack of the rifle split the gulch in half. Sharp. Final. The sheriff dropped where he stood. Legs gave first, then knees. Then his whole body folded sideways and slammed the earth. Dust leapt. His hat rolled. Blood spread fast beneath him. The boy did not lower his rifle. It stayed raised, pointed at nothing now, just hanging in the air like the breath he had not taken since the shot. The lawmen froze. Then chaos broke open. One dropped his rifle and raised both hands. Another turned and ran. 2 more backed away, eyes wide, mouths open but silent. One mounted his horse and kicked hard, galloped out of the gulch. Another followed. The last man stepped back, weapon still in hand, then looked at the boy, at the body in the dust, at the others disappearing. He dropped his gun. It hit the ground soft. He turned and walked. Only 5 heartbeats had passed. The boy still stood there, rifle shaking in his hands. The barrel wavered. His breath came in bursts now, short, hard, ragged. The man moved first. He reached for the Apache woman, helped her from the rock where she had knelt. She leaned heavy against him, her leg stiff, her hand pressed to her ribs. They stepped together across the gulch, slow, careful. The man stopped in front of the boy. The rifle lowered an inch, then more, then finally dropped. The boy let it fall. It hit the ground. His hand stayed up, empty. Fingers curled slightly. His face was pale, but steady. The Apache woman looked at him. For a moment, she only watched. Then she nodded once. It was small, but full. No words passed between them. The boy blinked, swallowed. The man looked back at the sheriff's body. Still. The dust around him had settled. The rifle lay near his hand, but untouched. Blood seeped into the dry ground, spread through the dirt, soaked into the fabric of the law he had carried. The sun angled lower now. Heat pressed down, but the wind had begun to move again. Light shifted across the canyon wall. The others were gone. Only the dead remained, and those who had chosen. The man turned to the Apache woman. She took one step forward on her own. The boy looked down at his hands. He rubbed them against his pants. Once, twice, then left them at his sides. The 3 of them stood in the quiet. And for the first time since the chase began, there was no sound of hooves, no gunfire, no breath of orders shouted into dust, only wind and the sharp edge of what had changed. The jailhouse stood quiet, its frame blackened, walls blistered from fire, the roof gone. Only the beams remained, some still upright, others fallen across the floor like broken limbs, no voices inside, no footsteps. Just wind pushing through the hollow space where justice once claimed a home. The gallows out front had been rebuilt, rough, rushed, the wood still raw in places. But one change stood out. A name was carved deep into the crossbeam, burned in with fire instead of hammered in with nails. Not a wanted poster, not a sentence, just a name. Hers, the Apache woman. Not as a criminal, not as a warning, as a memory. She was gone now. Far beyond the edge of town, she rode with her people again. The line of riders moved across the desert in silence, spears strapped, bows resting low, faces drawn from the old way. She sat upright. No limp, no sign of the wound. Her braid moved with the wind. At the rear of the column, a child turned once, looked back at the horizon behind them, then rode on. The boy stood at the edge of town, rifle slung low on his back. No one stopped him, no one called out. He passed the church, the store, the dry fountain in the center square. All quiet. A few watched him from windows. Some nodded. Others looked away. He walked to the stables, saddled the horse himself, tightened the straps with care, mounted slow. He turned once, looked up the ridge outside town. A single figure stood there, the man, hat low, one hand resting on his belt, the other in his coat pocket, fingers closed around something smooth and warm. The pendant, the carved spiral, still held the heat from the sun, or maybe from memory. He turned it once in his palm, then closed his hand around it again. Below, the boy rode east, his shadow long behind him. The man did not wave, did not move. He only watched. Wind pulled at the brush, lifted bits of ash from the ruins, scattered them across the dirt like pieces of something too broken to rebuild. The town stayed still. No bells, no gunfire, no names shouted into dust, just the gallows and the rope. It swayed slightly in the wind, not fast, not far, just enough to be seen, just enough to remind. No one would use it again, and if they did, they would have to carve a name with fire. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, and comment on the Old Western Tales.